What is up, everyone? This is Josh here, back with Call to Defend. It's been a hot minute, but we're hoping to stay on track this time and get things rolling again. So what we're going to be doing from now on, at least for the foreseeable future for the first few months, is we're going to be taking our FAQs, and as we post them, we'll also be having a podcast and YouTube video that goes with it that tries to expand a little bit more on what's been written, because we only have so much we can type out on these posts to make it, fit and not be, especially if it's on a picture, not be super tiny and hard to read. So I'm going to read you the post, what was written, and then I'm actually going to give a whole nother set of arguments. Well, not a whole other set, but just dive into that a little bit further with the two other verses and another issues with the questions at hand. Okay, so the FAQ that we're dealing with is, if God created the universe, who created God? Again, I'm going to read verbatim what it was I typed up before that you guys saw or will be seeing on Instagram and Facebook, and then I will also be expanding a little bit further on this. Okay. So, looking at this, I wrote, this is a fairly popular question by skeptics. The issue is this: we need to have a basic understanding of definitions. Given that there are so many religions in the world, many have a view that conflates all of them into essentially being the same thing. The issue is this is contradictory on its own. Genesis 1 reads in the first verse, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. This statement alone points at the very least three major components. In the beginning, time, space, and matter were all created together at once by the God of the Bible. Every other religion that is not a theistic religion deals with natural creation or creates within a universe, making them technically finite beings. Theists, especially Christians, believe in a God who is infinite. How do we know God is infinite? Well, let's look at the verse again. If in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, which means he created space, matter, and time, then that means he is timeless, spaceless, and immaterial. He's not made up of any components that would make him like us. He's not bound to the laws of physics, the laws bent to his will, since he is the author of them. The cosmological argument goes something like this: everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. There must be an uncaused first cause. This cause must be spaceless, timeless, and immaterial, since those things began to exist in the beginning. Not only that, but in order for a universe to come together, the uncaused first cause must also be powerful enough to create a universe and personal to make the choice to create. This sounds a lot like the God of the Bible based on the first verse of Genesis. Now, if God is infinite, can he have a beginning? No. For if he had a beginning, he wouldn't be infinite, and then we wouldn't have to ask who or what caused God to exist. And then the cycle continues. God had no beginning, and since all things that began to exist have a cause, nothing caused God's existence. Nor can he go out of existence, because then he is not infinite. Since God is infinite, he always has and always will exist. Our God is an awesome God. And I stand by everything I wrote there. Everything out there, I stand by it. And nothing I wrote there is brand new information. This actually information has been around for a very long time. It's been taught by a lot of apologists, a lot of theologians. Just to name a few of the living ones today would be people such as Frank Turek, William Lane Craig, Greg Koukl, Elisa Childers, etc., etc. These people all point to these arguments the same way as I do. But I'm going to be expanding on this a little bit. So if you notice, I focused a lot on Genesis, and I focused a little bit on the Kalam cosmological argument. I am not going to be making the case for the cosmological argument in this video. We're not going to be talking about the beginning of the universe specifically. I think this writing itself deals with Genesis 1, I think fairly clearly, that if God is made up of these things, and he's the one who created these things, if he created these things, he couldn't be made up of these things. Therefore, he's not a created being like us. So, but that doesn't quite solve the question fully, because some people still ask, well, what could have created God? Still, the reason this question is problematic is there's actually a few other reasons. That's the problem. The problem with this verse. This problem with this question. Let's try that again. There's a few other reasons why this question is problematic. The first being, it presupposes the idea that God is this being in the sky with this cloak or whatever around him and long hair and is kind of buff depending on who's painting him, and they kind of paint him out to be like Zeus or Thor. By Thor I mean like Marvel Thor, not like actual Norse mythology Thor, which, actually there's mixed bag on what he looks like there too, depending on which iteration. But anyways, they kind of like paint him out to be like this material being. But we just went over this. God couldn't be made up of those things if he's not, doesn't have a physical body. I mean, yes, the Son had a physical body when he came down as the incarnate Christ. But if he doesn't have a physical body, then those things are thrown out the window entirely. So it's assuming that God is a created being based on the idea that God has a physical form. But here's the thing. If we look at the book of John, for instance, let me get my verse pulled up. It says, well, John records, and this is the Apostle John. It reads that it says God is spirit, right? Many of you, if you're a believer, you might have heard this verse if you've ever read the book of John, or maybe you have encountered other people in your life that have expressed this verse in general. Hopefully you've come across this one before. I'm sorry, I'm still trying to get it pulled out. My browser just crashed. There we go. They should be working now. Sweet. All right, here it is. John 4:24. Where it says, God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth. This is, like I said, John 4:24. This is Jesus speaking. So this is God, the Son, speaking about God in general. We're not making a case for the Trinity right now, though. So first off, it says God is spirit. So to assume that God is a created being, meaning the fact that he's made up of these other materials, like he has a physical form, apart from the Son having a physical form, is to not understand what Christians believe. Like, at all. It's kind of actually an issue to go in with this question, with this idea in your mind, that is not what we believe. It's a straw man-ish. Maybe it's not a straw man, but it's definitely a misunderstanding of what we believe. But here's a couple other verses. There's two other verses I really want to draw attention to, and that's going to be Isaiah 44 and Revelation 22. Isaiah 44, 6 through 8. I am going to read these to you. Look at the ESV. Thus says the Lord, the King of Israel and his Redeemer, the Lord of hosts, I am the first and I am the last. Besides me, there is no God. Who is like me? Let him proclaim it. Let him declare and set it before me, since I appointed an ancient people. Let them declare what is to come and what will happen. Now looking at verse 8. Fear not, nor be afraid, for I have not told you from of old and declared. Fear not, nor be afraid. Have I not told you from of old and declared it? And you are my witnesses. Is there a God beside me? There is no rock. I know not any. So, this is from Isaiah, all right? So this is not just Christian theology. This is Jewish theology. The idea that God is not a created being. He knows no other God. So why point out that he knows no other God? Well, first, I have to point to the fact that this is a monotheistic religion. Secondly, the question not only assumes that God is made up of like these materials, but it's the question really just kind of falls on his face, because it's just trying to buffer the concluding point of saying that God exists. Because if it's saying that, okay, the universe exists and had a beginning, so if God if God would create the universe, then something created God. But if something created God, then there was something that was before God or someone before God. And then if you give him an answer for that, you could just say, well, it's the true God, and God created God, who created the universe. Well, they say, well, who created that God? And then you can back up, and it's going to keep going. All this question does is trying to bring a buffer point from the concluding fact that God created the universe. They're just trying to prevent you from getting to that conclusion, even though it's there. The question honestly doesn't do the job they're hoping it does, because it falls flat on its face. It's already assuming, one, that something created God, which means there was someone or something else out there, which means that there is still a God in the running. Now, this doesn't line up with Christian theology still, so we're just talking about from like the aspect of I just believe there's a God in general, and we have that issue. Here's another one. Let's look at Revelation 22. This is Jesus speaking this time, instead of just God in general. looking at Revelation 22. Oh, where'd my verse go? Again, this is Jesus speaking, where he says, I am the Alpha and I am the Omega. I am the first and the last. And that there is no other God beside him. Come on, load. Man, my internet's not working with me right now. I'm so glad I'm not streaming this. Man, I was on fire. By that I mean we were just rolling. Maybe it's a good thing we're slowing down. I'll try this browser. Sorry guys, my thing's all crashing. I know this is recording and not a live stream, but I like doing raw stuff. There it is. There we go. Revelation 22. Thank you. Internet not working. Never mind. It is not working. Alright, anyways. While that loads. While that is loading. So, in Isaiah, it points to the fact that God himself declares that he's the first and the last. In Revelation, Jesus declares that he's the first and the last, which points to the fact that Jesus is God. And then you have the fact that, something in John 4, where it declares that Jesus is saying that God is spirit. Here it is, Revelation 22:13. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. Which points to the fact that, essentially, in our concept of time, if he was there at the beginning, he'll be there at the end. But if he was there at the beginning, that means he had to cause the beginning to exist, which means he's outside the beginning, which means he is infinite, because he's not bound by time. And I already kind of went into earlier, looking at the article, well, not the article, but my post, where it makes that quite clear that philosophically and theologically, God is not a created being. So, what is something we could do? I just kind of provided a very quick rundown in 10-ish minutes explaining why this question is wrong. So what is something we could do? How can we respond to someone who asked the question, if God created the universe, who created God? I think the first thing to do is not just to barrel them down like I just did with you guys, with the facts of the Bible and looking at some philosophy and science, which we didn't really quite dive into the science of it and didn't totally dive into the philosophy of it. We did a little bit, but there's so much more to say. But how can we respond really to someone? I think Greg Koukl's book Tactics handled this really well. And the question we could be asking him is when they ask if God created the universe, who created God, we could ask the question, what do you mean by God? And what do you mean by created? Because if they give the impression that God is this being that's in the clouds, with like it was described before, that is not spirit, then we already know that they do not know what we actually believe. So then the other question we could be asking is, how did you come to the conclusion that I believe in a God that is like this, or I believe in a God that is created, or whatever they say? How did you come to that conclusion? And then, have you considered that's not what we believe? And well, what do you mean? They may get tripped up by the second question, honestly. They may explain to you the first one, what they think it means. When we get to the second question, then we're they hopefully won't try to dig a bigger hole for themselves. Hopefully be like, wait, what do you mean? How did I come to that conclusion? Is that what you guys believe? And they say, well, actually, no, that's not what we believe. What would you like me to show you? And when you get to the third question, if they do have a response for that, you could say, well, have you considered that is not what we believe based on what the Bible teaches and what based on science philosophy point to? And they'd be like, well, no, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? And then you can dive into it. The reason why I say you can ask these questions is, one, it keeps things rather chill. At least it should. And the point of these questions is really to open up the opportunity for a conversation so you can share the gospel with them in your words and your actions based on how you're treating them and by sharing the truth of who God is. And then this can open the door for, at the very least, planting seeds, which is not a bad thing. Let the Holy Spirit, let God do his work with the seeds that are planted. He knows what kind of soil they're going into. So let him do his work. And, if they respond to it, great. If they reject it, they reject it. But not only that, but you're also gaining insight on what they believe so you can know how to properly respond to them. And that's really important. We got to know how to properly respond to people in love and not just barrel them down with information. I know I kind of did that. I blew through that Instagram post and I gave you guys Isaiah, I gave Revelation, and I kind of just tore apart. Well, maybe I didn't tear apart totally. There's got to be someone out there's like, well, you didn't say this, therefore you don't know that you didn't quite deal with this question fully. But the question itself already has a bad starting point. All right, the question has a bad starting point. It assumes certain things that we don't believe. Now, if that is what we believed, then we do have to deal with that question on a further level. But the question has a bad starting place. And for me, if it's going to start off bad, you already know the question is not going to work. The question itself is nonsensical. It's nonsense because it's not what we believe as Christians. It's not what we believe even just by theists in general, but specifically as Christians. It's not what we believe. Because we believe in God who is spirit. We believe in a God who is the first and the last. It's not what is taught. And if we believe the Bible, if we're Christians, we follow the Bible. If you follow the Bible, then we go based on what the Bible teaches about who God is, how he wants to be worshipped, all those things. Hence why the Bible is so important for our faith. But if people are asking questions trying to trap you on something the Bible doesn't even teach, or even draw you can't even draw any kind of conclusion. Like specifically, if they're trying to pull from the question the idea that God is a created being, or that God is a material being, then we have no issue because it's not what we believe. They have the issue because they don't know what we actually believe the Bible to teach, and is preventing them from understanding the truth. But God can use that through us to have an opportunity to share the gospel with them in our words and actions so they can come to know who Jesus is. So the verdict is this question a good question? No, this is not a good question. This question actually just falls on its face because especially when used against a Christian and a Jew, because it doesn't make any sense. It's nonsensical. It doesn't line up with theology. It has presuppositions that deal with nothing that we believe. In fact, to believe any of those things about God, specifically, first off, to say that God was created is heresy. To believe that God is a material being, yes, I know, Jesus came down as God incarnate in the flesh. But first off, Jesus taught that God is spirit. Secondly, that is one person of the Trinity, when there's three persons, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Thirdly, at the beginning of time, Jesus didn't have the physical form. He was, he was spirit. It just doesn't. It makes assumptions that are just not true, and it runs into many issues with that. But we can respond with questions. We can respond with love, providing information. So to reiterate, a good 3 verses to pull from, just to point in the right direction. But of course, as always, read the context. Read the context, make sure you understand where it's coming from so you can properly give the correct interpretation fully on those passages, so that way you can explain why did he have to say that? Why is he bringing this up? So to go over that again, that would be Isaiah. John 4:24 was the first one we looked at. Then there was Isaiah 44:6-8. Then there was Revelation 22:13, and at the very beginning we looked at Genesis 1. A couple other resources that would be good to use. I would recommend Greg Koukl's book Tactics, as well as Street Smarts, where it deals with how to have conversations with people using questions, like I just mentioned before. There is also on the academic side, a little more academic side, there is the lighter academic side is William Lane Craig's On Guard. On the more academic side, like the heavier side, is Reasonable Faith by William Lane Craig. And then a good apologetics one just to provide general answers, but still good research, is Dr. Norman Geisler and Dr. Frank Turk's I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. With that said, I hope this video was helpful. We're trying to keep these things on the shorter side. There's so much more we could do with this. I just want to expand more on the fact of what was being already explained in the paragraphs itself, as well as providing some extra comments on this question. So I hope this was helpful. for you guys and fruitful. I pray the Lord does His work through this video and His glory be made known. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your week. I hope to see you again soon on another episode and to be able to dive into another question that people often have towards Christians. This is not, by the way, these questions are not just ones that we often hear from atheists. These are ones we hear from progressive Christians, like false Christians, but also questions maybe that as Christians that we just don't understand. For instance, not many people understand the Trinity. So at some point we will address the Trinity and try to dive into that. My hope is with a question like that, we'll have like a pastor or a theologian on here. We can have a conversation about the Trinity and dive into that a little bit further. I would love to get into some videos that have a little more conversation piece and not just a me talking piece. But anyways, I hope this was beneficial and fruitful for you guys and brings glory to the Father. I pray that you use the information we provide here and you do your own research, diving into this a little bit further, that you can expand on this as you engage others in conversations. Don't forget to ask questions and to be loving when you respond to others. Try to be patient and make sure you understand where they are coming from. Because if we just barrel them over this information, I kind of did that with you guys because there's no one here I'm actually talking to, right? I'm just kind of talking to the microphone, looking at a camera on the screen, and have my notes in front of me. But when you're with someone, asking these questions will be good. Like, okay, so just go over them again. What do you mean by that? How did you come to that conclusion? And have you considered that? Fill in the blank. The benefit of these questions, it allows you to know where they are at so you can properly respond. If you just barreled them over with information already, you might tick them off. You might send them off confused and cause all these other issues. And of course, we should not be afraid of making someone mad by sharing the truth with them. But if they're getting they might be getting mad though, because they're first off already confused. They don't even know what it is. So if we're just kind of barreling them over and treating them like they're stupid, they're not going to respond to that well. But if we respond with grace and love and ask questions so we know where they are getting at. For instance, if they do not, like I say, if they believe in what the Western people believe that God is, then of course they're not going to understand when we tell them, well, that's not what we believe. Like, what are you talking about? Well, that's the way but we won't know that if we don't ask them or if they give no indication. So we could be asking, what do you mean by God? Or do you believe that when you say God, do you mean you believe in this? And fill in the blank. And find out what they believe, what that we believe, so that you can properly respond and give the correct, loving answer. In fact, 1 Peter 3:15, as often as it's pointed to as saying, give a defense, if you keep reading, it says to do so with all gentleness and respect. Why? The point of it is so that when you engage in conversation with others and your character is loving and points to God, then they have nothing to say against you because you spoke honestly, you spoke truthfully, but you spoke with all love, and you spoke with grace, and they have nothing they can say against you because your character, your actions, and your words were all consistent and they all point to the gospel. So take this information. I hope it's helpful and these last few words of encouragement, and go forth and try not to get tripped up by this question, because this question is nonsensical and it's not as hard as one may think it is. It's the question has many problems. The first problem with the question is just the fact the way it starts. It has a bad starting place. All right, with that said, I hope you guys have a good rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you're listening to or watching this from, and we'll see you guys next time.